Alright, here's a full-length English story, well over 2,000 words, inspired by. This is what happens when backup singers take center stage. No headings, no boxes, just flowing story text as you asked. For years, they stood in the shadows where the lights faded softly, where microphones were turned down just enough to blend instead of shine. Their voices were the glue, the safety net, the invisible force that carried the lead singer when breath failed or nerves trembled. The audience rarely noticed them unless something went wrong. Backup singers were meant to be heard, not seen, felt but not remembered. And for most of them, that was the rule they learned to live by. Lena first stepped onto a stage when she was 19, her hands shaking as she adjusted the microphone stand behind the lead vocalist. The venue was small back then, a local theater with peeling red seats and a sound system that hummed louder than it sang. She had trained her whole life for music, learned harmony, breath control, emotional phrasing. But the moment she joined the band, she was told something very clearly: your job is to support, not to stand out. She took those words seriously. Too seriously, maybe. Night after night, she sang harmonies so perfectly aligned that people assumed the lead singer's voice was stronger than it actually was. She learned how to pull back just a fraction, how to soften consonants, how to disappear into sound. Applause washed over the stage like a warm tide, but it never reached her. She clapped for the lead, smiled on cue, and told herself this was enough. Beside her stood Marcus, tall and calm, with a voice that could crack glass if he let it. He never did. Marcus had joined the group later, already having tasted brief fame with a band that fell apart before its first album release. He understood the industry's hunger for faces over voices, for stories that sold better than talent. Being a backup singer was safer. No interviews, no expectations, no blame when things went wrong. Then there was Raina, whose laugh echoed louder than any microphone check. She had started as a choir kid, the kind that music teachers secretly built entire arrangements around. Raina loved singing more than she loved being seen. She said it out loud, often. "I don't need the spotlight," she'd insist, even when her eyes lingered on the center microphone a second too long. They toured together for years, moving from cities that blurred into each other, from hotel rooms that smelled like detergent and exhaustion. The lead singer changed twice during that time, but the backup singers stayed. That alone said something about who really carried the show. One night, in a sold-out arena glowing with phones and neon wristbands, everything changed. The lead singer, famous, beloved, unpredictable, had been fighting a cold all week. Soundchecks were shorter. Notes were dropped. The crowd didn't know, of course. They never knew until it was too late. Halfway through the set, during the biggest song of the night, the singer's voice cracked completely. Not artistically. Not emotionally. It simply failed. The music didn't stop. The band kept playing. Panic flashed across the lead singer's face as they pulled the mic away, coughing, shaking their head toward the wings. For a fraction of a second, the stage felt empty, exposed, like a heartbeat skipping. Lena felt something rise in her chest before she had time to think. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was recognition. This was the moment every quiet dream had secretly rehearsed. Marcus leaned toward her without looking. "If you want it," he said softly, "take it." The crowd murmured, confused. The lights wavered. Then Raina stepped forward, not all the way to center, but close enough that the audience could finally see her face clearly. She sang the next line alone. Her voice was steady, rich, carrying emotion without strain. The crowd fell silent. Lena joined her on the harmony, then shifted slightly forward, her voice lifting above the familiar arrangement. Marcus anchored the lower register, grounding the song like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. What happened next wasn't planned. No manager approved it. No director cued it. It simply unfolded. The backup singers became the song. The audience realized it slowly, like waking up from a dream and recognizing the room you're in. Phones rose higher. People leaned forward. Some whispered. Some smiled in surprise. The song reached its chorus, and instead of the missing lead, 3 voices intertwined, each distinct, each powerful in its own way. When the song ended, the applause wasn't polite. It was explosive. Backstage, the lead singer watched from a monitor, pale and stunned, as the crowd chanted, not their name, but something new. Something unclear, still forming. It wasn't rejection. It was revelation. The rest of the concert turned into something no one expected. The band kept playing, adjusting on the fly. The backup singers rotated lines, shared verses, played with harmonies that had never been allowed before. Raina danced more freely. Marcus stepped into moments he had always avoided. Lena finally sang without shrinking herself. By the final song, the crowd wasn't asking where the lead singer had gone. They were asking where these voices had been hiding. The next morning, clips flooded social media. Not polished clips, not official releases, but shaky phone videos full of screaming and disbelief. Comments poured in faster than anyone could track. Why didn't we know about them before? Those backup singers just stole the show. Honestly, I like this better. Industry executives watched quietly at first. Then they called. Managers pretended this was always part of the plan. Journalists suddenly wanted names, backgrounds, stories. For the first time, Lena saw her name typed by strangers. For the first time, Marcus heard his voice described as unforgettable. Raina read messages from people who said they felt seen by her performance. But the spotlight isn't kind just because it's bright. The lead singer returned a week later, recovered but different. The dynamic on stage had shifted. The audience watched the backup singers more closely now. Every harmony felt like a choice instead of an obligation. Tension grew in rehearsals. Who sang what suddenly mattered? One afternoon, the truth finally surfaced in a quiet meeting room with bad coffee and worse lighting. The label wanted options. A side project. A test single. Maybe a separate tour. They spoke carefully, using words like opportunity and natural evolution, but everyone understood what was happening. Backup singers weren't supposed to become competition. Lena went back to her hotel room that night and cried, not from fear, but from grief. Part of her had built an identity around being invisible. Stepping forward meant letting that version of herself go. Marcus sat on the balcony, staring at the city lights, wondering if he was ready to risk failure again. Raina paced, arguing with herself, torn between loyalty and longing. They talked until sunrise. No contracts. No promises. Just honesty. They decided to try. The first song they recorded together wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. It didn't fit neatly into any genre. It sounded like 3 people who had spent years listening to each other finally speaking at once. When they played it back, no one said anything at first. Then Marcus laughed, a sound full of disbelief and relief. "That's us," he said. The release didn't break records overnight. But it grew. Slowly. Steadily. People shared it with captions like, "You can hear the years in this," and "This feels earned." They performed on smaller stages again, this time at the center, under lights that no longer felt blinding. The lead singer moved on too, eventually, to solo work shaped by the lesson they never expected to learn, that no voice stands alone, even at the center. Months later, at another packed venue, Lena stood where she once avoided standing. She looked out at the crowd, then back at Marcus and Raina. The harmony began, familiar but transformed. She sang her line clearly, without apology. And somewhere in the audience, someone who had always believed they were meant to stay in the background felt something shift. Because sometimes, when backup singers take center stage, it isn't about stealing the spotlight. It's about finally letting the world hear what was holding everything together all along.